Hey everybody, it's Laura, A-HAH Coaching. I'd love it if you'd subscribe to my Facebook page and or YouTube channel. I generally try to produce content on personal development, healing, transformation, and concepts of neuroplasticity. I try to produce some content in both English and Spanish. Today's video is on neuroplasticity. I just want to caveat this, that this is by no means to replace any medical advice. This is not used to treat or diagnose any illness. Please always talk to your provider before making any changes, and please never abruptly stop medication or a treatment plan. All right, I hope you guys enjoy. Hey everybody, I have been talking about this neuroplasticity video for quite a while. I finally had the time to sit down and do it. Took me about 2 days of prep work just because I wanted to pull as much material together as I could. Went out and got a whiteboard, which you're going to use. I am a big fan of this whiteboard. It's marbled. And I am excited to share this with you. Want to make clear, by no means am I a neuroscientist or anywhere near that level of playing field. A huge respect to them. This is really based off of the work I have done with many, many people now over the last 4 to 5 years, as well as the conferences I've attended where all of them are doing their own studies and research and the data they have, and a lot of the material which I'm going to present to you. I am really sort of oversimplifying it and making it a little bit less formal, just to help us get an understanding of it. We're going to use the whiteboard and draw a lot of things out. Some books that I really, really recommend. This is my favorite. Doidge's The Brain's Way of Healing. I'm a little bit biased because this was the book that really propelled me into this area of things on my own journey. It is basically, really outlines neuroplasticity. Was so happy he signed this. I got to meet him at a conference 2 years ago. And so many case studies in here of people with all sorts of illnesses, from chronic pain to Parkinson's to vision issues and all of those things, and using the concept of neuroplasticity of how they either healed or improved dramatically. So highly recommend this one. It was actually his second book, and it is the one that I read. This is his first one, The Brain That Changes Itself. I won't lie, I've skimmed this mostly. Just because I gotten so much out of the second one. Other books that I highly recommend are, this one is very, very technical jargon. Somebody got it for me in my family a couple years ago. It's called Neuroplasticity by Moheb, Costandi. Again, this is more scientific and technical, and less about the actual application of it. Dispenza's work, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. A lot of you know about that. Really love this work in terms of understanding change and the brain science behind that. We're going to reference this a lot. I've been to a conference with him. Really, really recommend this. I use a lot of these concepts in my work. Unlearn Your Pain by Hart, Schubiner. This is actually a workbook as well. You get some of the scientific explanation and then you actually get the workbook with it. And another one I just threw out that I did take out, we're not going to reference a lot. This is called Coping with Trauma-Related Dissociation. And even if you're not dealing directly with trauma healing right now, again, just understanding how many symptoms the brain can drive, what a lack of regulation in the nervous system can do physically, I thought was great. So we're going to be using our whiteboard. We're going to come back to this book quite a bit. We're going to reference Schubiner's work a little bit as well. Starting on our board, we have neuroplasticity, which is the brain's ability to change in response to activity and mental experience. I like to say the brain is malleable, it's plastic, it can change. We used to not think that. We used to think things were sort of a permanent hardwired system. We learned a lot from stroke victims, and so stroke survivors, I want to say. And, the quote we're going to be coming back to all the time, this comes up all the time in, now I'm getting everyone's names, all of Doidge's work. Neurons that fire together, wire together. And we're going to come back to that a lot. So because the importance of repetition. Again, neuroplasticity is something that can help us if we know how to utilize it. And this is also not our friend sometimes because it can hinder us because that brain is malleable and can change when we don't know what we're doing. That said, I'm going to be speaking a lot about chronic illness and pain today. I want you to know this really applies to chronic stress, anxiety patterns, depression patterns, chronic things, you know, especially Schubiner talks about all the time. Those things all fall into this category. And addiction science is also very similar to this. That said, let us start with the way I tend to explain these things. So normally we have before the precipitation, before the current event, is we have a trigger of some sort. And this can be physical, and it often is. Injury, infection, that can be viral, bacterial, parasitic, surgery sometimes. When I say emotional, I'm going to talk about stress, trauma, major loss. Can be low-grade chronic stress, trauma, loss. Environmental can also happen. That happens a lot in these kind of illnesses. So exposure to some sort of chemical or toxin, like an established environmental toxin. Okay. A lot of times what I say is we have a combination of all three things, or we have, this is building up over time. And so here's what I really want to hammer home when we get into stress. When people say, I'm not stressed, when we look at personality types that are more prone to this, we're talking about what I call perfectionists. Some of this is also borrowed from Schubiner, high expectations, high achievers. I say rigid, anxious, critical, very self-critical usually. What did I say? Anxious, critical. Did I say high achiever? Hanging on, someone who's very resentful, hanging on to a lot of resentment. And what was another one? Hypervigilant. I could go on and on and on. I also say if you have some history with depression, anxiety, eating disorders, post-traumatic stress, any of that stuff, you are most likely living in a constant state of chronic stress. And we have to kind of take the definition away of what we think of as stress or not. I'm not talking about just conscious, I'm stressed out. If it was that simple, I think a lot of us would be in a different place physically and mentally in this country, in this world, I really want to say. So, other things I'm trying to think of, I'll come back to that, but you get the idea. So, if you super obsessive, OCD tendencies, all of those types of things, this is a form of low-grade chronic stress. So even if there's not some major trauma that happened, normally when I look back, I've worked with so many people over the years, and I cannot tell you when they say nothing really was happening. And we break down all the little things that were going on and how, this is going to be huge, how they were being interpreted and how they're being internalized. That is a bigger driver of stress than the obvious, like, I'm up to my eyeballs, I'm doing a lot, I'm stressed out. It's a lot about the internalization of events in the day-to-day. All right, so we have this trigger, and we lead, this into acute injury or illness, okay? So I got mono, all right? That's my example. Acute injury, all of you might have had I deal a lot with women with pelvic pain. They might have had a UTI, right? Or some kind of infection. Some people, it's just sort of a low-grade injury, right? And I'm going to pull out some quotes on there, but we're not there yet. But basically, this is normal. This is there to alert your brain. Pay attention, right? Like, that is what acute injury and pain and illness is about. Pay attention. This is an issue, tend to this, right? That's how we survive, okay? So you're going along. And everything's normal, right? They tell you, okay, it'll take 6 weeks to heal, it'll take 8 weeks to heal, 2 weeks of antibiotics, whatever it is. You're going along. But all of a sudden, you're getting past that timeline and they say, okay, just wait it out a little bit, wait it out a little bit. But this is not improving, right? And it's just not changing, it's getting worse, or you're not back to your functioning that you should be, or whatever it may be. And all of a sudden you're watching kind of month after month after month go by. All right, so then this is where we start to talk about a new neural connection is starting to get primed. And I'm gonna make this is why I'm laughing how I make this. I call it the sick pathway, all right? Sick. This new neural connection is starting to be primed, all right? But here is the big thing of how we're starting to lock it in through our own experiences. So even I know we talk about like shingles virus often starts priming a new neural pathway for chronic pain, and we're going to get into sensitization. There's so many avenues we would be here for 3 hours if we talked about all the avenues again. So I'm trying to make it simple, and this is how I explain the different factors that are going in. So we start getting stressors, right? And some of them I think are just any human being is going to have these. So you have the illness stressors is what I call them, all right? And those are the obvious. You have the actual physical symptoms that again are priming that pathway. You have the constant we get hypervigilant about them. We start worrying about them, so I say body checking a lot. That's a huge one. Everybody comes to me and they're body checking constantly. What's their pain level? What's their pain level? What's their pain is, what's their fatigue level? What's their illness level? Body checking constantly, worrying about the future. How am I going to get things done? Is it always going to be like this? What do I do? What else can we say? Hypervigilant, body checking, worrying about things. Then starting to get, super protective of maybe we're not going to move certain ways, maybe we're not going to eat certain foods. That is important because we're going to talk about that too. That starts to become a conditioned response to the brain starts to associate, okay, that food makes me sick, that movement makes me, pain. That's where we start creating even more of those pathways. All right. And general, just, what I say is then starting to think about, how this affects your day-to-day. If I do this like I did in the past, it might make me worse, etc. And just really the unknown. Okay, the general unknown. What the hell's going on with me? Why can't anybody explain this? This is super scary. What's happening? My life is disappearing, right? Okay, so that's one subset. Then we have what I call are the sort of systemic issues that are going to happen. All right, depending on the severity of this illness or pain. All right, so the systemic issues include, all right, loss of job, often loss of job or an income, so financial stressors. So financial stress. Okay, and then we have a lot of times loss of relationships. A lot of people disappear on us. So loss of support. Okay. We have the general systemic issues that are going to always exist currently as we work to change that, right? So we might have, a lot of people have medical trauma when they're trying to get answers. That's going to affect certain groups of people even more profoundly. You've got your general daily systemic oppression and racism. Okay. Sexism, particularly in the medical field. Okay, and then we are going to have a potential loss of basic needs. So some people can't get groceries for themselves or struggle to eat actually physically. So food, showering, you might even have loss of home. Okay. This is a whole nother level of stressors. All right, and then we've got factor 3. All right, so I want you to see we've got illness, systemic. I want everybody to be able to see. All right, and now a lot of what I say are childhood traumas, belief systems, and low-grade stressors get activated. Every single person on this planet has these. all right, particularly with this journey. So it's a feeling of being out of control, abandoned, helpless, misunderstood is a huge one. Flawed, like there's something wrong with me. Unloved. I'm going to run out of room on my board. Okay, we can make that list a mile long, but those are the big general ones you're going to see in this theme are feeling abandoned, feeling misunderstood, especially when a lot of people have been failed by, they've gone to gazillions of doctors and can't get answers, and a lot of times are blamed for what's going on. All right, they're wonderful doctors out there. I'm not going after anybody. All right, so then just a general experience, and what happens is all of these things feed back into this sick pathway that we're talking about. Let me make this little arrow a little bit clearer. All right. So this pathway starts getting lit up even more, and we're starting to create all sorts of sick neural connections, as I say, right? And I'm using these words to try to make it very simple and light. All right. Sick and pain is really what I want to say. All right, and all of these start getting activated. All of these stressors keep feeding it back, right? And this is just becoming more and more primed as the MO. All right, and so because remember, repeated experiences, and that can also be on mental experience, are what prime these pathways and create these connections, all right? And also what we have going on is we're longer here, use it or lose it. Okay, and that's a big one too. So we've got this going on, and we're losing a lot of our healthier neural connections. And so what happens is, as we're being primed, let me see if there was any big quotes I wanted to put in here. Yeah, so I use the word hijacked, okay? We're hijacked this way. And as these are being primed and are firing, okay, more mental space, more brain capacity is being used for pain interpretation, essentially, right? And when I mean pain, I'm talking about illness as the same level playing field, depression, anxiety, whatever, right? We can talk about all of these things. And again, we're being diverted away from healthy. We can't basically field a lot of basic input. So a lot of people notice they get more and more and more sensitized, right? It takes less and less pain. That's the quote I wanted to give you, right? From this pain doctor. It's basically, you're getting more and more sensitized, and it takes less amount of tissue activation to start to interpret pain in your brain, to start to feel pain. And also a lot of people will see, right, and this isn't for everybody, some people come with just strictly one thing, they often get super sensitive to a multitude of things. You're also getting your nervous system is super activated. I say, it's not regulated and all of those things. And so as these things are growing, you're more sensitive to pain, you're more sensitive to smaller inputs, so you're starting to lose a lot of your functions, right? It goes from I have pelvic pain, for example, to now I have pelvic pain, I can't really sit, I can barely wear, normal pants, I can't wear underwear, I can't wash myself there, I have to give up sexual activity, whatever it may be. And it keeps growing, and then all of a sudden it's just I'm in constant pain no matter what I do. Same thing with maybe a back pain, like I can't move certain ways, if I don't do this activity, and all of a sudden it tends to get more and more sensitized, and it's no longer just that, you can't do this, and then the list goes. Same thing with fatigue conditions. It went from I couldn't walk 5 miles, now I can't walk 1 mile, now I can't sit up, now and I've been there, right? And it goes on and on and on, because you're getting, this super kind of central nervous system activation almost, and you're getting super sensitized because, well, this is the quote I really wanted, I think is really, really powerful, is in our brain's way of healing. If we go to page, I liked this one so much because this really gives you so Moskowitz was a psychiatrist who turned into pain medicine, okay? And Michael Moskowitz, to be exact. So, and he went through his own chronic pain issue. So that he knew that when a particular brain area is processing acute pain, this is page 14, by the way, only about 5% of the neurons in that area are dedicated to processing pain. In chronic pain, the constant firing and wiring led to an increase so that 15 to 25% of the neurons in the area are now dedicated to pain processing. So basically 10 to 20 were hijacked, and he knew he would have to steal it back. So a big thing is this concept of sort of competitive neuroplasticity. And so basically, all of these neural connections are sort of competing with each other. And like you said, these got hijacked, right? So they're taking up, and he's got to kind of compete to take them to a healthier pathway. And also, so what we'll see is what I talk about a lot is on this journey, it's very up and down, because when you're under a lot of stressors, Schubiner talks about this a lot too. There are people, things will be fine, and 5 years later, they're going through a massive stressor in their life, and old symptoms from an old injury site might appear, old symptoms from years ago reappear, right? Because again, it's activating that old pathway is getting activated. So that's important too for you to remember when you're on this journey and it feels up and down. Again, it's just simply like, oh, my old pathway is firing. All these old neural connections are firing. Okay. Or I'm too many stressors going on at once, and my system kind of caved into the old. And so this is the big thing here. We're going to talk about, all right, now how do we interrupt this? And so with this sick pathway, so you see what I was trying to get at, you see just more sensitization to everything. It might be to not just, pain levels, light, sound, foods, environment, and all of those things. And then we start to think, we're out of control over here, right? And so we try to start controlling those things. I have people that come to me eating 5 foods. I've been there, controlling that, trying to micromanage everything, which is another form of stress. I want to put that in the illness category, is micromanagement. And this whole board's going to have to get erased anyways. Okay. And also that also just primes these connections. The brain starts to associate those things, right? Okay. Because we are conditioning a little bit of a fear response to those things as well. Even if they did make you sick. But again, it was because we were in this crazy hypersensitive system. And I knew that made a lot of sense for me, because my journey went from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. And it was sort of like, it seemed like I was getting sensitive to the whole world, right? I mean, every small input was setting off my whole nervous system. And it's basically, made a ton of sense to me when you've got this hypersensitization going on and you can't field basic inputs. So basic inputs become stressors. Exertion becomes a stressor. Light becomes a stressor. Sound becomes a stressor. Food becomes a stressor. And again, I want you to think of sort of now this entire autonomic nervous system is completely dysregulated, which affects every system in the body. All right, so what I might do is draw this on a piece of paper. So what we're going to do, so these are firing, all right? And we're creating all sorts of sick pathways, as I say. And so basically what we're going to do is we want to interrupt this, okay? We want to interrupt this and start to create, let me erase this so it looks a little nicer. I can probably do it here. I thought I was going to have to use something new. We want to stop this and interrupt and give it new input for a healthy pathway. And again, I'm making this super light, right? Like sick, healthy, right? A healthy pathway. And that's going to look different for everybody, right? So I try to use really the affirmative language. So, literally you want to think about, health, vitality. If you're working on depression, happiness, peace, whatever that is, more presence. Again, this is the same concept for really trying to wire so many different new experiences in. So what we're going to do is basically anytime these things are firing, even whether it's via the physical sensation, whether it's through the mental constructs around it, the experiences around it, we interrupt this. And there are so many programs that teach you how to do this. I teach people, if they are coming to me with no knowledge of a program, we set up their own individual plan on how to do this. There's so many different ways. And it can also be working on the physical level, giving your body new input that creates neuroplasticity. They talk about that all the time, right? With exercise and, mental stimulation and et cetera. So we're going to interrupt basically that pathway and send it to new healthy input. So some programs use concepts of visualization. That's super powerful because it activates parts of the brain as if it's already happening. There are things that work on sort of literally changing your body position and language and all of those kind of things. Breath work is a huge one. It actually re-regulates your nervous system in that moment if you're using it correctly. So many different things. Sometimes people do this as like, and they use distraction, but what you have to do is, that sounds very simplified because a lot of people can't pull that off. You'd have to be completely immersed in what you're doing. But basically, you give it something new to work with. You give your brain something new to work with. And here's the big caveat that people fall down on a lot. All right, so people think, all right, I interrupt this pattern. I do a round of something, and so I do this and they start checking. And if you go right back to checking your body, we're right back into this category number 1 is what I always say. But number 2, this is going to take a while. You have to think about how many times this pathway has fired over the years and how ingrained this has gotten. This is firing all day long, every hour of the day, right? For most of you. So to create this new pathway, we're literally sort of priming it like, oh, okay, you want to go there. It doesn't mean the connection forms right away. All right. It's sort of like when you're learning a language. That's huge with neuroplasticity. You're forming new connections. Okay. So you're forming a new connection. You are not focused on the change in the physical or mental symptom. All right, or emotional, right? You're not checking that. You're kind of knowing, I'm rewiring my brain. I'm rewiring my brain. In that book, they talk about somebody who had this horrible car accident, debilitating spinal injury, chronic pain, all of this stuff, who at the time had to sit there all day and was remapping their brain visually in their mind, and had to do it for months and months and months and months. And the change was so slow because you have to think, when we have healthy, we'll get the translation into the physical symptoms over time. But for now, we want this to become the default pathway. To do that, we have to keep making the connection, keep priming it and keep priming it and keep priming it. All right, so we want to keep firing this. It's going to want to go there, especially when there's other circumstantial stressors going on. Okay, so we keep our ground of doing what we're doing, whether it's using a program, whether it's learning how to do that, interrupting, giving new information. And that doesn't mean when we say this is the difference, this isn't positive thinking. It's not just go blow through everything and try to go run a mile, because that's probably not going to work too well, right? But it's also changing our relationship with these things and realizing, okay, this is being driven by so much of my brain. And it makes it very real. Brain can produce paralysis, okay? That's what conversion used to be about. And it was not a popular term, but there are case studies which I found fascinating where you had people who were paralyzed for years, and there was no spinal cord injury. That was a case study we looked at, but with a lot of work and this kind of concept, and they did a lot of the emotional work. 5 years later, all of a sudden we're able to walk again, right? But that was produced by the brain. So recognizing when we say it's produced by the brain, it is a very real experience. We are not discounting the suffering by any means, but it's realizing, wow, I have the power in my hands to create healthier connections, to give my brain something new to learn and work with. So over time, I can have this be my default pathway, and I always say, you'll be taking care of yourself always and super into self-care and aware of these things because we don't change these patterns, right? That's where I say we start firing this in under a lot of stress. So that's okay if that pops up from time to time, just realizing, oh, an old pathway is firing. Sometimes even if you go through like a viral illness or whatever, it might linger a little bit longer. It just sometimes fires the old pathway. No big deal, and that's not to dismiss the pain it might be causing at the moment, but we're constantly working for this, and over time we will start to see the change. And I have seen this happen for numerous people. All of these guys are doing numerous studies. This is well documented. But again, biggest caveat is it's not we're doing this looking for the change. Some people it does change rapidly, and some people it's a long journey. And as we keep doing this too, we're also learning about just constantly regulating our nervous system and all of those things. I think I touched upon everything I wanted to touch upon for now. Again, I know I have in some ways really oversimplified this, but remembering you know, what we're doing here by interrupting and creating a new pathway, neurons that fire together, wire together, all right? So every time we fire this, we're wiring a new pathway, and we want this to eventually become the default pathway instead of this. And as you see, as we kind of get rid of all of that extra firing and connections that are going on over here, we leave more capacity for input, you know, in terms of our threshold for pain, our threshold for light and sound, and even emotional. You know, a lot of clients, when they're in chronic pain, it's very hard for them to be able to handle things emotionally, or be there for people, all of that stuff, right? Because their brain is essentially hijacked with, you know, pain processing. So as we do this, all of those things start to open up. You can, again, use this for so many things: depression, anxiety, OCD, addiction concepts, stress, right? And it's pretty amazing to think this can start to be your MO, even if it never has been. All right, guys, I hope this is helpful. I will put all the resources in there. I'll probably even cite them correctly. And let me know if you have any questions. And I hope this was helpful. I tried to put a lot of time into it. All right, talk to you soon.